Hi, I'm Everett White, and welcome to Deep Coverage, our partnership with The Athletic. Thanks for being here. Week 1 of the NFL season is in the books, and minus the lack of fans, the piped-in crowd noise, the active distancing, and the NFL social push, the games have been pretty indistinguishable from a normal season. The challenges, though, of holding a professional football season during a pandemic still stand. To talk about that and all the news surrounding the revamped football season, Amy Trask joins us live. She's an analyst for The Athletic, a contributor for CBS Sports, chairman of the board of the Big Three Basketball League, and former CEO of the now Las Vegas Raiders, where she was the NFL's first female front office executive. Amy, thanks so much for joining us today. How you doing?
I am doing well, and thank you for having me. It is an honor and a pleasure to chat with you.
I'm so happy to see you, and I'm glad to jump into this conversation. Let's jump right in. So the first game's in the books. And it's the first time players from different areas are going to be or have been mingling. All NFL players and coaches passed their COVID tests last week, and it seems like they'll likely pass this week. Amy, as a former football executive, what safety concerns do you have going into the second week?
Well, I don't think anything changes other than that which you just indicated. Teams are traveling now, and they are mixing and mingling with others with whom they haven't mixed and mingled. The league is doing a tremendous job of testing and tracing and limiting the number of people on the sideline and who are near the players and the coaches. Masks are required on the sideline. The league actually sent out a memo this week reminding everybody, pull your masks up if you're on the sideline. The league is doing really all it can. We don't control the virus, but we do control the protocols, and the league has put a number of terrific ones in place. So cross your fingers that this continues to work throughout the regular season, and then perhaps the league should consider in bubbling for the postseason, as MLB has announced it will be doing.
Oh, we'll get to that in a second for sure. But going back to the kind of safety concerns and just COVID in general, what financial implications do you see for the league, the players, and any affiliated businesses and fans if there isn't a bubble? And what do you see if there is a bubble?
Well, a number of people have asked me about the impact of no fan or fan-related revenues. What does it mean to the teams that there are no fans in most stadiums, and in those stadiums which have allowed or will be allowing fans, there'll be a reduced number? So that impacts ticket revenue, club seat revenue, suite revenue, concession revenue, parking revenue, any number of revenue streams. And the answer is that will impact different teams very differently, because those revenues constitute a very different percentage of overall revenues for a number of the teams. It is a very significant portion for some. It is a less significant portion for others. And remember this one thing: ticket revenue itself is shared between and among the teams. So the home team, when selling tickets, I'm not talking about suites or club seats or PSLs, but the base ticket keeps roughly 2/3, and the league as a whole shares the other third. So the impact is split over the 32 teams of that revenue stream. Is there going to be an impact on revenues? Of course there is. Can the league survive this? Yes, they can.
Oh, great answer, Amy. So you mentioned that the MLB and the MLB's Players Association agreed to have playoff bubbles with daily testing. That happened yesterday. And you wrote earlier in September that the NFL should do the same, though Dr. Alan Sills, the NFL's chief medical officer, said the league had no interest in creating a bubble. What do you think of the MLB's decision? And does this make an NFL bubble more likely? And I guess, do Dr. Sills' words have any bearing on how you feel about that?
Well, thank you for noting with respect to MLB that it was the MLB and the Players Association that decided this together, because you're so smart, and thank you for doing that, because that would have to be the same for the National Football League. If there is to be a playoff bubble, it would have to be agreed to between and among the league and the Players Association. Look, I wrote a few months ago for The Athletic that a bubble for the regular season would be tremendously challenging, given the number of teams and the number of people who would have to be bubbled for each team. Could it be done? Sure, it could be done. We built a space station. We put men and women in space, and they live on this thing that's floating around. So could there be a bubble? Sure. But would it be very, very, very difficult to do it for the regular season? It would. What I proposed in my most recent article on this topic for the league, about a bubble for the league, is that the league should consider in bubbling for the playoffs. First of all, you'd be in bubbling a whole lot less teams, so it would be easier to do. And I went ahead and suggested what I think is a terrific location for the league to bubble for the postseason, and that would be Los Angeles. And I articulated in that piece why that's the case. Will the league consider it? Right now, it doesn't appear so. But if the testing doesn't continue to show the terrific results it is, and if circumstances change as we get closer to January, maybe the league and the Players Association will consider this. We don't know what the world is going to be like with respect to the virus in January.
Great answer, as always, Amy. And just wanted to make a note for our fans that Amy is the originator of the term embubbling. You can look on Urban Dictionary right now, and you will see her name as credited for it. So give her credit, give her flowers as she deserves.
If I could jump through this screen right now and hug you, which of course we can't do because we wouldn't be distanced, I would hug you because I am very, very proud of that. It's a drop the mic moment for me, and bubbling is now in the Urban Dictionary. And if you don't think I'm telling my nieces and nephews every day that their aunt is in the Urban Dictionary, you don't know me very well.
I'm sure they're proud. I'm sure they're really proud and showing all of their friends. Going back to the idea of a playoff bubble, you said that a regular season bubble would be really difficult because of all of the sort of factors. You listed the amount of players and the team personnel. What other factors go into any sort of potential NFL bubble?
Well, for the league as a whole during the regular season, it really is math. It's 32 teams times, let's say, 150. It could be as low as 100. It could be as high as 200 on average per team, because you not only have players, you have coaches, trainers, doctors, equipment people, umpteen personnel that are helping with the team. So let me just throw out a rough number of 150. You multiply that by 32, that's obviously a lot more than if you multiply it simply by the number of playoff eligible teams. The other issue is stadium availability. For the playoffs, if the league chooses to in-bubble, and if they follow my suggestion of coming to Los Angeles, there are a lot of stadiums within very, very, very close proximity. So you could in-bubble here and have all the games on different fields at different times in a manner that wouldn't chew up the turf too badly on any one field.
Oh, there's nothing worse than some chewed up turf, as you can probably remember as former Raiders CEO. And it's interesting you mentioned the amount of different fields and facilities that LA has. It would be very similar to the NBA's bubble situation in Orlando, where there are just a bunch of different teams all sort of encased in one, or embubbled, as you would say, in one locale for a specific period of time. But going back to your tenure as CEO with the Raiders, so we're going to talk a little bit about the social justice aspect of NFL right now. The Washington football team changed its name. The Kansas City Chiefs amended their fan conduct rules to be more sensitive to native populations. And then many other teams are enacting social justice initiatives, specifically around the Black Lives Matter movement. How do you think the NFL has responded to the call for social justice over the past few months?
Well, I'll touch on the Washington issue first. I spoke out about that publicly back in 2013, and I said, look, I understand that if not all the fans, the vast majority of fans of the Washington team didn't intend to say anything that would be harmful or hurtful. But the fact is, when you open the dictionary and look the word up, it is defined in the dictionary as a derogatory racial slur. So back in 2013, when I started calling for a name change, and I had stopped saying the name a number of years before that, but I spoke publicly in 2013, a lot of people gave me the side eye like I was crazy. And now we see that there are substantial changes being made, and there need to be so many more changes. I am old enough that I remember very, very well the Rodney King protests we had here in Los Angeles roughly 30 years ago. I was with the Raiders. The Raiders were in Los Angeles. And I really thought at the time of those protests, okay, now we're going to see change effectuated. This is going to make a difference. This is going to help. And it didn't. So here we are some 30 years later confronting the same issues. And my hope is, because so many of the people involved now, not only players, but in society in general, they weren't even born 30 years ago when those protests occurred. And they bring a certain, I can only use a French expression, a je ne sais quoi, a strength, a creativity to helping with these problems that I hope will do just that and help. And social media will help, and the manner we have of connecting with one another will help. We can have conversations with people throughout the world in real time in a manner we couldn't do 30 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm hopeful that all of these things put together mean the change that I had hoped and believed we would have seen 30 years ago, we will see now. As to the National Football League, they are always going to be in the position, in my view, where they are doing more than some people think they should be doing. And they are doing far less than some people think they should be doing. They're going to have to continue to navigate this. And I will quote someone from a movie, do the right thing.
Great movie, and I'm sure Spike Lee is watching and proud that you quoted him. Sort of hearkening to your time with the Raiders, what sorts of conversations happen in front offices when there is this push for social justice initiatives?
Well, I had a tremendous fortune that I recognize most people, not only in the National Football League, I'm talking business at large. Many people don't have the good fortune I had. I worked for a man, Al Davis, who hired without regard to race, gender, ethnicity, or any other individuality, which has absolutely no bearing on whether one can do a job. Chronologically, not in order of importance, of course, chronologically, he hired Tom Flores. Then he hired me. Then he hired Art Shell. This was not a one-off for Al. And he didn't care about those individualities, race, gender, ethnicity, religion, or anything else that has no bearing on whether one can do a job. So my point in sharing that with you is the conversations we were having, that I was having with Al, that we were having as an organization, were very different, I am sure, than the conversations many businesses throughout this country are having.
Gotcha, Amy. And the Raiders historically have been one of the more progressive franchises in the NFL. Like you said, Al Davis hiring the first Black head coach, the first Latino head coach, and obviously you, the first female front office executive. Going back to that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Given that this is Bloomberg, I will share with you a theory that may have people rolling their eyes at me, and that's okay. But it's what I call business Darwinism.
Business Darwinism.
It is my belief, and it is certainly my hope, that if there is such a thing as business Darwinism, that ultimately those businesses that don't hire the way Al did, without regard to those individualities that have no bearing on whether one can do a job, will not succeed in the manner that those businesses who don't care about those individualities succeed. And perhaps they'll fail, because what they are doing, by definition, is eliminating vast swaths of qualified people who can help their businesses be better. So here's to business Darwinism.
Here's to business Darwinism. And we've certainly seen multiple studies on and had reporting on Bloomberg showing that the more diverse an organization is, the better its outcomes. And you would know tons about that given the Raiders' illustrious history. And you've written about it for your book, You Negotiate Like a Girl. Could you tell us about any sort of backroom dealings or war stories from your time there? I'm sure Al Davis had a bunch of just, moxie in the back offices there in Oakland and in Las Vegas and Los Angeles.
So many stories to tell. I will share one, and I'll try not to cry on Bloomberg, but it is a moment that touched me. It touched me deeply. I choke up when I think about it to this day. We were having a meeting at our offices, and it was an important meeting. We were meeting with a business with whom I was looking to make a deal, and I asked Al to come to the meeting. And he did, and he walked in, and one of the representatives of the business with which we were meeting was a woman. And he says to her, "Oh, it's nice to meet you. I want to let you know I try very, very, very hard not to swear in front of women." And I look at him, and I look at all my colleagues in the room like, did he just say he tries not to swear in front of women? That's my face. And he goes on and he says to her, "And even if I do swear in front of you, I will never swear at you. I don't swear at women." And with this, the pen I was holding in my hand flew out, landed on the desk with a thump. And Al looked at me and said, "Oh," and he realized what I was thinking. And aloud to everyone, he said, "Oh, I swear at Amy, I don't consider her a woman." And that was the highest compliment he could have ever given me, that he didn't consider my gender when we were doing business, and when he hired me, and when he advanced me, and when he cussed at me.
No question. Did you swear back at him at any point? You don't.
All the time. That's
Okay.
the biggest misconception about Al. The biggest misconception about Al is that he wouldn't tolerate disagreement, and he wouldn't tolerate people who disagreed with him. If that were the case, I would have been fired roughly 2 weeks into my job, because we had a knockdown, drag-out fight. And of course, I don't mean physically knockdown, drag-out. I was sitting in the room with someone, a colleague. Al walked in and he ripped into this man like I can only imagine a velociraptor would have ripped into flesh. And after a bit of time, I realized Al was wrong. And I said to him, "Excuse me, you're wrong." He turned around and looked at me like, "First of all, you've been here 2 weeks. What? I'm wrong?" And I said, "Look, if the facts on which you were basing your conclusion were correct, your conclusion would be fair. But you are basing your decision, your conclusion, on inaccurate data, and you're therefore wrong." And he yelled, and I yelled, and there was cussing. And after quite a bit of time, he looked at me and said, okay, I gotcha. And that was that. And I learned then, 2 weeks in, that I could disagree with Al, I could disagree with him vehemently, but if I was going to do so, I needed to come armed with facts. And I will tell you that over the course of almost 30 years, I disagreed with him more than I agreed with him.
And I'm sure that you came to some very good conclusions and some very bad conclusions in that that time with the Raiders. And I'm sure you're excited to see them taking off again in Las Vegas this coming Monday.
It'll be exciting to see that building.
What's your prediction for the Raiders season? You already want to know.
Oh, boy. I am sort of, yeah, there's my prediction. They're going to win their first game. How's that? Of course, we know they already did it. I'm not a good predictor as to games. I think what happens is I hearken back to my years in the league, and I never liked to predict because I felt that was somewhat jinxy. So on CBS Sports, I am asked to predict games. I will tell you that I was the only one of any of us on our pregame show last week to pick Seattle to win its game, and I'm going to be gloating about that the entire show this week.
Well, here's hoping that your CBS picks are right again this week. But that's going to wrap it up. Amy, I'm so thankful. I want to thank you for taking the time to talk to us. I'm glad we got to learn a bit about how an NFL front office operates during such trying times, and just to get your perspective on what it's like being a woman in an NFL front office. It's invaluable, and I'm just grateful to have had you here.
Well, I thank you. The privilege and pleasure really and truly was mine. I've been a big Bloomberg fan and follower. And as I mentioned, my husband's down on his Bloomberg terminal now. So thank you for having me. This is a real treat. And now I've got some credibility, in the business world as well.
Well, I'm sure he'll see this on his terminal very, very soon. So thank you guys for joining us. We have Amy Trask here, and I'm Everett White for Deep Coverage with QuickTake and The Athletic. Bye, guys.